Good evening. Welcome. I'm Warren Frace, and welcome to the City of Paso Robles Short-Term Rental Workshop. So, quick overview of what we're going to be doing tonight. So, the purpose of this meeting, just overall, we have a short-term rental ordinance that's in place. It's set to expire this August. So this is the process of discussing a possible extension of this. So this is a workshop. No decisions are being made tonight. This is just to get input from the public. So we're going to have a presentation from staff. They'll walk you through basically what the current ordinance is, some of the trends that we've seen. We'll have some recommendations in terms of maybe some changes that might want to be considered. And then most of the meeting actually will just be focused on public comment. So we're going to invite everybody to come up to the lectern, make comments. We'll capture everything. Whatever comes out of this meeting is going to be reported to the Planning Commission and City Council for any future meetings that will be scheduled. So as I said, I'm Warren Frace. I'm the Community Development Director. We'll go around the room and just introduce all the staff members real quick.
Brian Cornell, Administrative Services Director.
And I'm Darren Nash, City
Reed Harris,
Planner.
All right, so we will get started then. So let's start with just how did we get here? So the issue of short-term rentals started becoming kind of a conversation in the city around 2014, 2015. So we had a big workshop back in 2015, filled this room, and it was clear from that meeting that there was a lot of issues and concerns, both from neighborhoods and operators about short-term rentals, and that we really needed to adopt some sort of policy for the city. So the City Council created a short-term rental task force. It was made up of members of people that operated short-term rentals, neighborhood groups, that sort. They had 9 meetings in 2016, and they came up with a draft ordinance that was recommended to the Planning Commission and City Council. City Council considered that ordinance in 2017, but decided not to adopt it. So after all that, we still didn't have an ordinance. So we still had issues, so basically the City Council decided to reconvene the short-term rental task force in 2019. They went through the process yet again. They had 8 public meetings to come up with a new draft. That was actually approved by the City Council, so that's the ordinance that we have on the books right now. So that was adopted in 2019. One of the provisions of that ordinance was it was only good for 3 years. So it has what's called a sunset provision, which means it automatically ends in August unless it's renewed. So that's kind of what we're talking about, is what a renewal process would be. There was also a provision that the City Council would review that ordinance every year. So they reviewed it in the summer of 2020 and again in the summer of 2021. That's when they directed staff to start beginning the process of doing outreach for a potential extension of the ordinance. All right, so that is basically the background. I'm going to turn it over to Katie and Lori now. They're going to kind of walk us through just kind of an overview of what's in the ordinance and some of the trends that we've seen.
Thank you, Warren. Like Warren said, the ordinance was adopted in 2019, and so it will expire this year. And then some of the kind of most important or the kind of highlights of the ordinance. So first, the ordinance differentiates between home shares and non-hosted accommodations and provides for different standards for each type of rental. It does require a 100-foot separation in the R1 district for non-hosted accommodations. The ordinance set parking requirements and occupancy limits. So depending on the number of bedrooms, you have to have a certain number of parking spaces, and you can only have a certain number of guests. It also required the city to establish a short-term rental hotline, which we have since done, and there'll be some slides on that coming up. The ordinance allowed for the non-hosted permits to be transferable only in what are called the T-zones. And you can see on the right there's a map that kind of shows this is on the west side of the city, west side of the freeway, that purple boundary. And you'll see that on a number of maps that we'll look at in upcoming slides. That's what is officially the T-zones. It also, so at the same time that the City Council adopted the ordinance, they also adopted a supporting resolution that set some other standards, including how many permits that we could issue. So these are the policies that were in that resolution. Like I said, it set some numeric limits. You can see there in the table. In the R1 district, there was meant to be 75 permits, although all existing business license holders were allowed to get permits. And so we did end up actually issuing more than 75, and we'll see that in an upcoming slide. And then 250 in all other zones were allowed, and a total citywide of 325. The resolution set out how the permitting process would work, what would happen for violations, and then also required that annual review process. And so something that I know a lot of people are concerned about is the number of permits that the city is currently offering. The current process that we are going through will just be to update the ordinance. Once the ordinance is updated, it's going to expire in August, and we've got to get that done or else the program is expired. Once the ordinance is updated, we will come back and then decide how to amend the resolution, which sets those numeric caps. So just so everyone's aware, what's being proposed, the updates that we're talking about this evening are not related to the number of permits that the city is offering. So that actually repeats the same information. So here's a map that shows most of the city, but it doesn't have the airport and it doesn't have the Target Center, but kind of everything else. Everything in orange is what is the R1 district. So most of the residential areas on the east side of town are the R1, and then kind of in the hills on the west side. So to the west of the historic grid downtown, those are also R1. Everything in gray in the city is kind of every other district. And then again, you can see that purple boundary, that's the T-zones. So those are the areas where permits are transferable currently. So these are the number of permits that we ended up issuing. So in the R1 district, we currently have 56 home shares. So home shares when, of course, someone lives on the site and then rents out a portion of their property to short-term tenants. There are currently 110 non-hosted permits in the R1. That was originally limited to 75, but the grandfathered permits we're still at 110 there. So a total of 166 permits in the R1. Similarly, in the all other zones, there's a few home shares, a lot of non-hosted permits, up to 233 for total. So in the city, we have 399 issued short-term rental permits. That includes both home shares and non-hosted accommodations. So as we said a couple of times in the R1 district, so this is about the numerical limits. So in the R1, we immediately met the cap. We have not issued a new short-term rental permit in a non-hosted short-term rental permit in the R1 since the initial 125 permits were issued, and there have been no more. We've had about 15 people have withdrawn their permits. There's been a little bit of attrition, and that was the City Council's intention, that over time in the R1, as people sold their properties, as people decided not to have short-term rental anymore, there would be attrition. So we've gone in 3 years or 2.5 years, we've seen 15 of those permits go away. There was also a citywide cap. We met that cap in May of 2021, so not quite a year ago. So there has been a little bit of movement on the citywide cap because some permits are transferable and some are not. Anyway, we have issued a few, but at this point we are at the maximum number. So now we're keeping wait lists for non-hosted accommodations. Currently, in the R1 district, we've got 21 applications on our wait list. Those folks come after we get down to 75. So there's 35 people that have to stop operating a non-hosted accommodation in the R1. And at that point, we can start considering the 29 folks waiting on that wait list. We've also got 33 people waiting for permits in all other districts, and they are not over the limit. So as soon as one becomes available, we can make a permit available to one of those 33 folks. So this shows you basically where those permits are. So again, that purple block shows you the T-zones, and then the blue dots are where we have a permitted short-term rental. The kind of summary is that 2.5% of all homes citywide are now non-hosted short-term rentals. That's an approximation. And then on the west side, we're seeing that there are about 6% of homes that are west of Highway 101 that are currently non-hosted short-term rentals. The short-term rentals do pay what's called a transient occupancy tax. Similar to hotels, anyone who stays in a short-term rental in town also has to pay that tax. It's a 10% hotel bed tax. It's a significant revenue source for the city, so that is something to be aware of. As I stated, the resolution that was adopted in 2019 did require us to set up a hotline, a 24-hour hotline for folks to if they have complaints or issues with a neighboring short-term rental that they could call. We have contracted with a company called Host Compliance. They, in addition to the hotline, they also help us with these different services, address identification. It helps us to link advertise short-term rentals with the short-term rental permits that we have, and to help identify folks who are advertising short-term rentals who don't have permits. And that is the second thing there. It helps they help us with compliance monitoring and sending out letters to folks who are out of compliance. And then, as I said, they do host our 24-hour hotline. So every new short-term rental permit that is issued, the owner is required to send out a brochure to their neighbors. Currently, the notification radius is 50 feet. So if you're a neighbor of a short-term rental, if you're within 50 feet of it, you should have received this brochure. All guests who stay in the short-term rentals are also required to receive this brochure. It sets out how many people are allowed to be in the short-term rental. It kind of gives the guest an idea of the expectations for them to be a good neighbor when they're staying in our neighborhoods. We do have a short-term rental hotline. You can see the number there. This is also on our website. You can find it, but just if anyone isn't aware of it, there's the phone number there to call the hotline, and that is available 24 hours a day. Host Compliance then makes a call to the owner or the agent for the short-term rental, and they are required to respond within 30 minutes to whatever issue is going on at the site. In the 2.5 years that we've been using this system, we've received 84 complaints. Of those, 74 were for noise, so that is the most common complaint that we get from neighbors. And just so everyone's aware, almost 70% of all the calls we've received have been on just 4 properties. So it definitely is isolated to a few properties where we're getting a lot of noise complaints. There does seem to be a correlation between swimming pools and noise complaints. They just seem to go together. People are outside being noisy, and neighbors are concerned. So many of you participated in the online survey that we've got running online. There was a question in there about the short-term rental hotline. Not very many people had used the hotline, just 24 of the about 300 who had responded. But of those, 25% reported, only 25% reported that they felt that the nuisance had been resolved within 30 minutes. So there's a disappointing result there, obviously. The survey is still up on the internet, so you can still take the survey. You can find it. Here's a long address, but you can go to www.prcity.com/STR for short-term rental, and you can find a link to that survey as well if you'd like to participate. That's still live. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Warren for some of the staff's recommendations for the ordinance.
Thanks, Katie. So what we have on the screen here is a list of some refinements to the ordinance that staff is thinking need to be discussed. So this column, the gray, this is the rules in the existing ordinance. These are some potential changes that staff has noticed over the last 2.5 years of watching this ordinance kind of be implemented. So I think one of the first issues is right now we have the issue of the home share. So the home share is where the owner's on site when they're renting. Right now, the rule is that the owner just needs to be on the property. Well, sometimes we have properties, large properties with multiple units, that sort of thing, so that the owner and the person renting potentially aren't in the same unit, which kind of defeats what the assumption was with the home share, where that it would be small and that the owner would be basically supervising what was going on with the tenant. So one refinement potentially would be to change the definition where the owner has to be inside the same resident, same dwelling as the home share rental. So that's one change. Another one, we have some lenient exceptions for parking, especially historic properties that don't have parking. There's a way to allow that has created some parking impacts in neighborhoods. We're thinking that we probably need to kind of phase that out and increase the parking requirements so everybody's providing the same parking. The existing ones that are already permitted will continue to be allowed to use whatever their current approved parking is. Right now, there's an exception for home shares that allows the owner to be out of town for 30 days. That's kind of created a loophole. We're not sure, if that's being exploited, and it's really difficult to monitor. That may be a section of the code that should be changed to minimize or eliminate that exception. Right now, in the T zone, which is the downtown historic zone, permits are transferable when you sell the property to the next one. We need to talk about that, whether that needs to be limited. That is affecting resales because there's a limited number of permits. We are aware that houses with permits that can be transferred are selling for significantly more than neighboring properties. Also, it basically extends the waiting list. So the idea with the waiting list was there was going to be turnover and opportunities for new people to get permits, but if they're continuing to transfer, that's basically extending how long people have to wait on the waiting list. We're notifying neighbors within 50 feet. We're thinking we probably should talk about extending that at least to 100 feet so everybody has adequate notice. So those are the changes that we're proposing. Those are actually fairly minor refinements. I think overall we believe that the ordinance is working effectively. We believe that it makes sense to extend the ordinance probably permanently. So I think in general staff's recommendation to the Planning Commission and the City Council will be to extend the ordinance with minor refinements. So this is all open for discussion. This is the purpose of the meeting. So we are now to the point of public comment. So what we'd like to do is invite those that want to have either questions answered or make comments to line up here at the lectern. We'll use kind of our standard 3 minutes for each speaker. If you want to come back and ask questions or make statements after your 3 minutes, at the end when everybody else has spoke, that's fine as well. So with that, we will get started. So anybody that wants to come up, let's come to the lectern. Okay, we'll go to those in a second.
Okay.
And if you want to give us your name, that would be helpful.
Hi, my name is Annette Dragavon. I think a lot of people know my name. So I am one of the 4 houses that is getting a lot of complaints. And we are in a situation where the pool is like 20 feet from our deck, where we sit a lot. The weather here is great. So it is an ongoing issue when renters come, and pretty much all summer it's occupied, and they have screaming kids, they're drinking and partying. Now this is during the day, and my understanding is that there can be a 70 decibel level of sound, which is like standing next to a freeway during the day. And my concern is that the city is really favoring out-of-town investors and business people in consideration of this ordinance, because this home is the only home that we own. I feel that the value of the property is going to be negatively impacted by having an Airbnb right under our house. And also our quality of life, normally it's like we measured 40 decibels. We have a very quiet neighborhood except for this one house. So to go further into that, the hotline, the reason it's not effective is because look at how many complaints there are. Nothing has been done. My feeling is that if someone who is a resident, a full-time property taxpayer who lives here and shops here year-round is having that much trouble with the house, and I know it's not just me, I know that there are other people, and no, we're not targeting it, which I think Beth said at one of the meetings. We feel like we've been targeted because nothing is happening. They consider us the nuisance for calling and complaining. And that's not fair. We moved here for a certain quality of life, and this Airbnb, it's in an R1 zone, which many towns prohibit You know, I can only speak for myself, but I moved into a residential neighborhood not to have a business with a pool operating like a hotel or a public park, 20 feet from where I like to relax and drink my coffee in the morning. So that's basically, let me just take a look here. Oh, so the 100-foot separation, I don't get that. I know the thing was grandfathered in, but I think it should be grandfathered out because it's way too close to us and to other neighbors. The position is just off, and it should be taken off the rental program. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next. If we could get your name, please.
Tom Zevely. I'm new to the area. I see what work has been done by the city staff. Looks pretty good. I live in the 700 block of Park Street, which is the T-zone. And in that block, there are 6 vacation rentals. Since October, I've lived there permanently. And my observation, the most remarkable observation, is the parking. 3 of the 6 vacation rentals have tolerable to acceptable parking, and the other 3 do not. One of them has 0 parking, so all visitors park on the street. The other one has 0 parking, so all the visitors park on the street. The third one has 1 little parking slot, which is essentially inadequate, but it could work for us. It works for a small car. So it changes the neighborhood. And one of the rentals, sometimes the car average is between 3 and up to 7, but usually 3 to 6 cars, and a lot of visitors. No other remarkable observation. Something that catches my attention, and it was mentioned in your presentation, of the revenue to the city. And of course, there's revenue to the property owner. So when you have revenue coming in, it's very attractive. And I think what occurs in my short observation here in Paso Robles is the person that gets the short end of the stick is the average Joe homeowner. Now, our property, I can have a vacation rental because it's a small apartment building, so I can do anything I want with it. It's currently empty, so I'm like a prime candidate for hosted, and I can get on the waiting list. My choice is not to do it, but I don't have anything against vacation rentals. What I see in my walking around the town is it changes the neighborhood, and it's mostly not positive. But I will readily admit, in the neighborhood that I live in, there's nothing unusual other than the parking. So I hope staff and the participants understand who's getting the short end of the stick and recognize and do not dismiss the revenue generation, because when money's involved, people do all kinds of funny things because they're very interested in money, like I am. I hope I win the lottery.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. All right, next.
Before I can pose my question, can we just look at the slides again? And it was going to be somewhere around slide. So I do have a question on this slide here, though. Just remind me about the home share owner on property and the home share owner must live inside the residence. That doesn't really happen currently, just so that you know. I mean, none of the homeowners are there. So if you could go to the previous slide, and I kind of know this because I can almost point out almost every single Airbnb in the hood. One second. Next slide, please, thank you. Oh, this particular Good Neighbor brochure, have never received it. And I've got 3 Airbnbs, right? And that is not me in my neighborhood. So never have received. And next slide. Okay, next slide. So there's a real density, if I'm understanding this correctly, so please explain. There's a density on the west side, especially, all those blue dots, right? And you say it's 2.5% of all the homes are vacation rentals right there? Citywide, but what's the density in that area on the west side?
So if you take all of the west side, it's 6%. Is that kind of the number, Katie?
Okay. Okay. I do question that. And if you could go to the previous slide, and I'm almost done. I think it was something about the comment about the sale of the home and then grandfathering the listing or the ability to do the transfer of the Airbnb. That, I think, should be null and void. If the home sells, that's just the way it goes. You shouldn't transfer it. So to your amendment, that's my recommendation. There's no question to that.
Okay, thank you. All right. Do you have one ready? So we have some online callers, so we're going to mix those in. So let's go to the first online caller. Caller, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. You have
Ken
3
Robinson.
minutes.
Okay. So we have a place on the west side which also has a pool. Just for the record, nobody's ever complained about our pool, and I don't think people are out there 24/7 in the pool. Anyway, I talk to my neighbors regularly when we're down. We were just down for 3 months. They all totally embrace it. Nobody had a complaint. They all mentioned the place was easy, no problems, any issues of any sort. A couple things I did want to point out. I felt your survey was sort of not all that neutral, and I feel like the vacation rental owners, such as my wife and I, are partners with the city and trying to do good things. I'd like to see a survey that asks not only for the problems, but also for the benefits and positive things. Just as a basic thing to mention, we do reinvest our money. We spend a lot of money on local purveyors of yard service and plumbers and electricians and cleaners and all sorts of locals. They benefit from us. The people that stay at our place, they're often, they're out there buying meals and wine and enjoying spending a lot of money in town, which is great. We had a good year, as I think most people did. We paid a lot of taxes, and I think that's, goes for all the important things in Paso, which is a great thing. The only issue we've had with neighbors is one of our neighbors who lives there full time is not an STR owner. He's taken to waking up at 2:30 in the morning and lighting his fireplace and talking right near our bedroom. And after the third or fourth time, I walked over there and asked him to be quiet. Turned out he had server's ear and was apologetic. But just the fact that you can walk over and talk to people, I think that is a pretty good way to resolve things, and it resolved it for us. Other than that, I think the proposed amendments make sense. I would like to see the permits to be transferable. I think it's a valid use and a good revenue source for Paso, and I think it should be perpetuated. And last, I think the ordinance struck a nice balance. It wasn't what I wanted initially when we went through all this a couple of years ago, but I think it's worked well, and I think it's a fair and even thing to do for the community. So that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Can we get your name once again?
Ken Robertson.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we're going to go to the second caller. Caller, can you hear us?
Yes, would that be me?
Okay, go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Mr. Frace, thank you. This is Vince Vanderlip calling, 323 15th Street. And I think the ordinance has actually been working fairly well. Like anything, I think we could, excuse me, we have a family issue going on here. Let me close the door real quickly. I think it can always be worked on like everything, but I think the thing I would like to see is I would really like to see some analytics and some data, kind of kept. Unfortunately, you'll never hear the good things, you only hear the bad, but it would be nice to know, complaints per short-term rental or something like that. Because we know how many short-term rentals we have. It'd be nice to know how many complaints we have, because I think all in all, I do sympathize with the people that live close to those units. And if it affects their lives, then obviously it would be nice if we can do something about that. Secondly, I think in the R1 zone, it's probably wise to keep those the way they are or try to avoid those areas of any expansion of the short-term rentals. However, I would support a down short-term rental, maybe increasing the permits close to town, because I think the short-term rental demand is there. And I think close to the town center is probably a good place, the T3N or the T4 zones, the T4 rows. I think that would be good areas to expand that, because those areas are typically where you have multifamily or hotels or apartments, things like that, close to the town center. So I think it might be time to consider maybe an expansion or increasing the number of permits that they're already maxed out in those areas, in the higher density areas. So that would be my thought with that. But I do appreciate all the work everyone does with this and the patience, because I know it does affect everybody's lives. So thank you for taking the time to have these workshops. Appreciate that.
All right. Thanks a lot, Vince. All right. We'll go back to the speakers in the room. Sir, your name, please.
Yeah, my name is Larry Hernandez, and I just wanted to clarify on the slide I saw the where it showed the number of people on the waiting list and the R1 residential area to be 29. And I was just wondering if that was accurate, because I thought I heard the speaker say that we're 21.
I think you just goofed up when you were speaking for a moment, and then you went back to 29, so 29 is accurate.
So 29 is what it is. Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome. Short 3 years. Good evening. Katrina Keats, 305 Hilltop Drive. I was studying the dashboard, the blue dots, and on our street we've had 2 real estate sales. Fresno Street, which is adjacent to Hilltop, has had 2 real estate sales in the 2021 year, and on Ridgeview there's been 1. These are non-transferable. They are still blue dots on the dashboard and on the map. Could you explain? Question. So why, or what is the mechanism when a real estate sale happens that the permit is no longer valid? And you don't have to answer me now.
Yeah, so I think the permit's in the name of the property owner, so if it's transferred to a new owner, then it's no longer valid. I think those are the sorts of things that sometimes staff has trouble tracking, but if we become aware of it, that is something that we can enforce.
That's just 3 streets that I found.
Okay.
Also,
So
on the dashboard, the circle, the graph, you show 126 in R1. And in October at the meeting for the city council, it was 110, which it is currently. I just don't know who does the drafting on that. Is that part of host compliant?
Well, the 126 number was the original number of permits that were issued. So that included all the folks who were grandfathered in. So that's what we initially started with, and now we're down to 110.
Right.
Just to address a little bit more of your previous question too, it is kind of tricky because the permits last for 3 years.
Correct.
And we're not notified when homes sell, unless people are calling and letting us know, or they're doing what they're supposed to be doing by closing their business license, and then business license department will let me know and I'll close the permit. So that is, like Warren mentioned, it's difficult to track.
So I think there's a loophole that needs to be tightened up in that respect. per se.
Right, but at the same
And-
time, the new owners aren't able to utilize that permit because they're not able to put the
Correct.
business
So are
license
they
in.
hedging with the city? That maybe a wink, wink, nod, nod, that things are going to be expanded or they're going to be transferable? So those are questions I have.
Compliance.
Pardon?
If they are.
Operating out of compliance is.
So,
Many of the permits are, this fall will be expired. At the moment in time, we will have an opportunity for people to have to reapply. And
correct, but I think there should be a link between the real estate sales and those permits that somehow the city is no. The notification, 100 feet better, because in our street, across the street from a STR, they were not notified within the 50 feet. So definitely like that, and that's about it. Main thing was the real estate sales and the non-tracking of them. Thank you.
Transfer enforcement. Yes. You got that on there? Okay. Welcome. You're next. If you would get your name, please.
It's Carrie Becks. Okay, I don't have to do that, do I? All right. I'm new here, and I love Paso. I'm experienced with Airbnb and short-term rentals. I'm doing currently a home share right now, and the people are absolutely lovely that come to stay with me. I've used how Paso has put the ordinance together with the city that I was living in El Segundo, as an example, because you've done an amazing job. There are always things that have to be tweaked, and I don't know where the lady is, but if so many people are calling to complain, I think it's up to the police of Paso to do something about those. If there is a party house, it's not fair to the residents that live and the neighbors. The Airbnbs that I have in El Segundo, there are so many rules, and the people come there just for quiet. And the people that come here really just want to do wine tasting and things like that. So maybe the city could, after 3 incidences, put down some restrictions. In El Segundo right now, if you have 3 complaints, you're shut down. And I think that's fair. I think that the people that have pools and those kind of things, they should have very strict rules because they are tax-paying people that own the property. So it's very important. The other thing I can say also, and I'm going to leave with one of my Airbnb guests, I'm going to I'll read a little bit of her note. I'm part of a program through Airbnb that takes not hostages, I'm so sorry, but refugees from Ukraine. And I've offered my home always to people that need a place. This came in just a few days ago, and she said, she's coming here. She's my regular guest. And she said, Carrie, of course I'm coming. Not only am I coming, I can't wait. It's been a rough couple of weeks. I don't know if I ever told you, but I was born and raised in the capital of Ukraine. Not only my mother currently lives there, but my brother, my nephew, and close to 100 friends and acquaintances. My classmates, my college mates, my neighbors. My heart has been heavy in the devastation. So after 6 days of driving through the Ukraine alone, my mother was able to get out through Slovakia, Czech Republic, and into Germany. 10 days of travel, 1 car, 4 cats, 1 backpack, and a Mazel Tov cocktail. So I left everything. She flew out to Germany, so blah, 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 blah. These are the kind of wonderful people that we do get as guests, but it's up to hosts to be responsible to the people that are our neighbors. It's very, very important that you do give the brochure, that you enforce these laws, and maybe the city could put some restrictions. If you have more than 3 complaints, I don't think you should be able to run your business or shut the pool down. Have maybe 1 hour. So is my time up? I know, it always goes up, sorry. Okay,
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, next. Okay, we'll get through these that are standing.
Hi.
Welcome. If we could get your name, please.
Linnell Soxman, Paso Robles, Hilltop Drive. I'm not against short-term rentals, but they are problematic in the R1 zoned areas. Personally, I have 2 vacation rentals that are very near my house. One is a home share, so that's not an issue. Another one across the street often has large groups, and I have made a complaint, but not to the hotline. I phoned the management company directly, and that was mainly about, people who bring their dogs, and the dogs are just barking a lot, and they've been very helpful about that. But I think the thing to remember, we not only have microclimates, but we have kind of micro auditory zones. So it really depends where you are. So the rental across the street from me, I really don't hear any noise from that at all. But there are other neighbors who do get that sound that kind of goes down and impacts them. And it seems to be especially the rentals that have like outdoor hot tubs, like big hot tubs or pools. That seems to be a lot of the issue with the sound travel and the decibels. So that's maybe something to think about. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Let's capture it again. Next up, welcome. If we could get your name, please.
Sure. My name is Cheryl Stetzel, and I wanted just to speak from my experience. I was here for all the meetings 3 years ago as a homeowner at that time with a vacation rental downtown. So I came to all of those meetings and they were a lot of fun. At that time, a lot of the complaints were about the R1 districts, and most people, especially the board or the city council, wanted to really encourage vacation rentals in the T-zone and the downtown area at that time. It seems like today that might have been changing. In our experience, we bought a property in downtown on the corner of Park and 18th. It had 3 units on it. It was completely run down. It was like the people that lived in there were, I think they had a meth lab in one of the units, honestly. And we spent about $200,000 fixing up the units and turning them into vacation rentals. That increased the property values for our property, but also for the neighbors' properties. We reinvested, like other people have said, we spent lots of money on subcontractors and people and just building up the community. And I do agree that bringing in those vacation rentals helps build the community and putting that money back into downtown. We sold that property and then bought the property next door, which also has 2 units. And same thing, it was completely disgusting. And we have been spending the money to fix up that property. And what I've seen is in our neighborhood, because that area wasn't really super nice when we bought first 7 years ago, neighbors have started fixing up their property. It's inspired them to make their properties even nicer. And the whole neighborhood has turned around over the last 7 years, from us just first starting with that one property and continuing on. One thing I wanted to mention is that you guys have, it looks like you're trying to make the rules even stricter and harder than they were 3 years ago. And I don't necessarily, I guess my question would be why? Is it not working the way it is, that you feel like it needs to be harder and stricter? And if you're not able to enforce the rules you already have, people have asked like, well, who's enforcing this? And you guys are saying, well, we don't really have anybody to enforce it. Then why would you make it even harder? Who's going to enforce it again? I guess would be my next question. And lastly, I would say if you're able to discuss changing the rules now about some of these other things that you've selected, like parking counts and things like that, why are we not able to also discuss increasing the number of permits that are available? Why are we selective about what we're able to discuss and what we're not?
So you can discuss anything you want tonight. So if
right.
you,
but she made the comment that we're not able to change that rule until August.
Yeah.
But why are we able to change some of these rules, but we're not able to change that?
So it's just the procedure. We want to make sure, because the ordinance has to get updated, otherwise it expires, and until it's updated, we don't know if we even have something to talk about. So the procedure is going to be focus on the ordinance first, and then the resolution that has the permit limits will be a follow-up item. So that's just the process
So
we're
the
going to go
resolution that has the permit limits is not part of the original ordinance, that's in addition to?
So the way it was adopted, and this is kind of common with city legislation, is they'll adopt an ordinance, because ordinances are laws, so they're fairly rigid. You can't change them very often. Resolutions are easily modified by the council at any time. So that's why the permit caps were in there, so the council had flexibility to update those when they saw fit. So that's why we want to get the ordinance done, because that's pretty rigid and it has a lot of process to it. The resolution is easily modified, and that's why the permit caps are in the resolution.
Okay, well, just my last, I know I'm running out of time because I asked a question.
But your point is you would like to see an increase
I would like to see an increase in permits,
so
and
we'll
I
make
do
sure
think
that's on
that
there.
it would be a mistake to make like parking harder in the downtown area with historic homes. There's plenty, at least up where I am, I'm not sure about other parts of downtown, but off of Park and 18th, there's a ton of street parking available. I think it would be a huge mistake to crack down on that T-zone.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, next. How many callers? Okay. And after this one, we're going to go to the callers, and then we'll go back to Beth.
Okay, Coralie McMillan, and I don't believe there's anybody in this room who doesn't think I should get a short-term license like tomorrow. And that's what I'd like you to put down there, that the ordinance is too restrictive and not flexible for exceptions. We have the lot right across the street from here, the art studio, Dale Evers, that lot, and we have the lot next to it with the commercial building that has the rock in the front with the hologram art. Those two lots are ours. We've had them since 1973, before we even had children. And let's see where we're at. And we are in an industrial area. We have the police station, safety center next to us. Next to us is the Chevelle, where we have to stay quiet for them and blowers or anything like that because of the people that are staying there. We have a proposed hotel catty corner from us. I don't even know how many rooms and buildings are in that one. And then across from us, the Chevelle is already on target to start and do theirs. So here we are. And so they go, well, you're on a short list. Well, last October when I was 74, I was on the short list. Well, now I'm 75 and I'm still on the short list. So my concern is if I'm going to live long enough on this short list to even have, to do more than 30 days. I think that so there are exceptions. There are places where there aren't neighbors, there aren't people swimming pools. We have one apartment. Now, when you think that we already have the parking, off-site parking, we already have the water, we already have the electrical, and all these hotels, they don't have any of this stuff. And yet there's no problem in okaying all of them. And even think about maybe bringing big airplanes in. And yet here you are with one apartment right in the middle, but because the ordinance is not flexible at all, I'm on a forever short list waiting. So I definitely think that we are definitely in the area where we should be able to have a short-term rental. Downtown is very expensive. We pay like over $11,000 a year in taxes. And so it's not like it's cheap real estate. So we need to be able to, when there's opportunities in certain areas, to go ahead and do this. So that's all I have to say.
All right, thank you. And we're going to take a couple callers real quick. Caller?
Hi, my name is Crystal Bradshaw. Can you hear me? I'm Crystal Bradshaw.
Yeah, go ahead, Crystal. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you. My name's Crystal Bradshaw. I own a vacation rental at 177 Pacific. I have had a license since 2014, so 8 years. I just wanted to say that I am in an R1 zone on Pacific. However, I have never had one complaint. I back to open space. I face open space. One of my neighbors is also a grandfathered vacation rental, and my other is a renter who prefers to have a vacation renter next door. And then on the sides of both of my neighbors are also open space. So my point being is that I do think that vacation rental permits should be transferable if you are in a location that's already been vetted and it's problem-free. It seems silly to me that I would be in a location for 8 years with 0 complaints, and that if I were to sell my property, I would lose my license, a new owner couldn't buy it, and yet someone else could then pop up with a vacation rental in a new place, taking my permit spot in a location that's not been vetted. Like, I just want to really make that point, that seems kind of like a silly thing to do. The second thing I wanted to say is that I'm also in real estate, and at the beginning of the pandemic, I got hit really hard, and I couldn't pay my bills with my short-term rental because everybody canceled. So I actually tried to sell my house, and I couldn't get it sold. It's an 800 square foot 1905 house. It's adorable. Everybody loved it. But everybody that was coming from out of the area, and they were saying, well, we want to buy this house, and then when we're not living here, we want to be able to rent it. And the main issue that made it preventable from being sold is that they couldn't short-term rent it when they weren't there as a second residence. So I just want to say that's impacted the value of my home. And, you know, my house is not a reasonable size for most people wanting to buy it as a primary residence. So I think that's something that should be considered. I also want to point out that there are houses that are my size that have sold since the pandemic that are in an eligible zone. So say they cross over at 15th Street and they're not in like a super urban area, but they happen to be in an eligible zoning, and those houses are selling for $100,000 to $200,000 more than what I could get for my home. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the tax. I feel like the tax is kind of crushing for us. And I don't know if you guys know this, but the county is able to separate their line items for tax with Airbnb. And when they do that, it's separate. But since we have to add it into our price, the consumer that is coming in not only is paying, Airbnb is setting their tax rate to the consumer on top of your tax. So they are taxing your tax. So I really hope the city can work that out with Airbnb going forward. There is a way to petition them to separate out your line item for tax so that people are not getting taxed on top of the tax. When I look at Paso Robles, I think the consumer through Airbnb is getting about 26% a night on tax once they add on the Airbnb taxes. Let's see. I also wanted to say the petition you sent out.
Hey, Crystal,
for us to fill out with.
We're almost out of time. Can you wrap this up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say the last one was that the petition you sent out was a little one-sided. It didn't leave room for any positive comment. It kind of assumed that there were problems. And like I said, there are so many people that are not having problems, and the ordinance is working. So I would really encourage you to make it less restrictive instead of more restrictive moving forward.
All right. Thank you very much. You ready? Caller, can you hear us okay?
I can.
All right, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Lisa Mcconnell, and I'm calling as the STR owner. And we were very involved in the last 2 or 3 years in the ordinance, and I wanted to compliment the city on how successful it's been. I can hold my guests accountable to a 10 o'clock noise ordinance, and also some of the other businesses around who didn't feel it was necessary to hold to the 10 o'clock noise ordinance. So since we all have that, that's fantastic. My guests are amazing people. They tend to want to come, spend the day, spend the evening relaxing. We are in a T-zone. We are just outside of the parking, monitoring the paid parking monitoring. So we have a little bit of a harder time now with that going on, but we do provide at least 3 or 4 off-street parking spots for our guests. I know several $1 million have been paid in just from the calculations from Paso Robles Vacation Rentals and a few of the other professional vacation rental establishments in Paso Robles. Several $1 million have been paid in for the last couple of years. I think this is a fantastically positive experience for, maybe 99% of the guests, the residents of downtown. I fully support if an R1 vacation rental is causing problems for people that own, rent, live next door. They should absolutely call the hotline. It's been very effective, and we need to keep doing what we're doing. It's been great. The pandemic has been very hard on all of us. We suffered, most of us, 1 year of no bookings, cancellations. It was rough. Last year was great, and a lot of us are just starting to get some of our vacation rentals back online after having to move friends or family into them just to pay our rent. So go easy, people. We're really trying. We're shucking and we're jiving, and we're hoping for a great 2022. And we don't want to drive the residents of Paso Robles crazy, because we are residents of Paso Robles, and we want a harmonious and fantastic experience for everybody. And I just want to promote that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Back to the room. Welcome. If we could get your name.
Hi, I'm Beth Burke. I live at 1527 Park Street. I have a permit for my home as a short-term rental, and I work for Paso Robles Vacation Rentals. So I do have some positive comments and then some questions. My first observation would be that 84 complaints over 2.5 years regarding 325 short-term rentals seems like a very effective ordinance. That's an incredibly low percentage of complaints. Question about your proposal to revert to non-transferable permits in T-zones. I would wonder why. Part of the trade-off I have living in a T-zone is I live catty corner from a pretty good Mexican restaurant with neon signs in its window. Living in a T-zone, there are trade-offs with mixed use and commercial neighborhoods, and so I would suggest being able to transfer a permit and impact a neighborhood with businesses across the street is not the same effect as in R1 or R2. I would suggest, since there are 110 permits in R1 and 84 complaints over 2.5 years, that it might be appropriate to raise the cap to 110 rather than 75. You've already got 110 short-term rentals performing with very few complaints, and then raise the other cap overall so you're not robbing from the other zones. When it comes to the permit and the fees, I'd like to suggest you've already done, and you two ladies particularly, have already done the heavy lifting with permits. We're moving into primarily a renewal phase, and I would hope that would mean the cost of those permits could go way down. I'd like to see either a 5-year extension or make the ordinance permanent. I think the big issues have been hashed out. It's showing itself to be effective. I think we can move forward. And then I'd like to know, I think some letters were probably sent in on the topic for the workshop. Will those be made available publicly somehow?
Yes, we've received a number of public comments, and we're always encouraging public comments. We'll get those posted so those are available.
Somewhere on, where would I look?
Probably on the website. So
Okay.
the short-term rental website will probably be the best place to see information.
Awesome. All right, thanks. You guys have done a great job.
Thank you. All right, sir, you're next. Welcome.
Thanks, Warren. Mitch Culver. I have 2 SDRs here in town and in the T1 zoning, and was involved in the first round. First of all, I want to thank you guys, the staff. You guys, we have the best staff, period. And man, you guys have done a great job. I'm kind of the, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I think most of the people I've been talking to, very pleased with the program as it's currently laid out. It's been doing its job. It's been going well. I've had no complaints on either one of my STRs. I'm in T1 zoning. I keep saying that, heck, I can go ahead and put in for a hotel. I can go ahead and put in for a nightclub, music venue, do all that. But, oh my gosh, if I have a vacation rental, I come under all these rules and regulations. So be it. It's been working. It's been quiet. All the vacation rentals that I've seen have brought up the neighborhood's values extremely well. It hasn't been an issue. As far as transferability, I think that's important, especially for people who have businesses, especially in the T1 zoning, because quite frankly, if there's a bunch of office complexes down there, there's a bunch of other commercial businesses, and that's all part of the business, and that's a business neighborhood. Transferability is important to people so that they know what they're dealing with in the future as they build and move along. I'd just like to see really people being, you're not going to be able to please all the people all the time. And I know that there are people out there, I was born and raised in this town, and they're starting to complain about the traffic in the downtown area. But with popularity and with success is going to come traffic and people. They're paying the bills. And STRs are paying the bills. And if it's not broke, don't fix it. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to the caller and then we'll go back. Caller, can you hear us?
Let's go to the caller and then we'll go back.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Caller, can you hear us? Yeah, hi. This is Josh Brava. I'm calling as an STR rental, as an STR owner. My wife and I guess I'd like to tell our story. We've been visiting Paso Robles for the past, 15, 20 years. We've kind of fell in love with the area. We've been visiting, we've been going to wineries, we've been spending money at restaurants and going to hotels. We've been kind of over time have been putting thousands of dollars a year into Paso Robles, and we just visit where we live in Ventura, and this is kind of a place that we like to get away to several times a year. It got to the point where, it became expensive to go to hotels. Everything was booked. We were overpaying for staying at the Marriott. So we had an opportunity to pick up a property on Lower Vine Street. The beginning of Vine 100 block. We sat on the property for 5 years. We finally started building on it a year and a half ago, completed it last year, and our intention was to build luxury suites geared towards wine tasting, geared towards bringing people to the community and enjoying Paso Robles for what it has to offer, as well as a place for us to go to stay. And I think the whole intent was to us to bring something back to the community, as we've heard echoed from other STR owners. We beautified a block, a part of a block that was run down with other apartments. We've actually had noise complaints to our guests from the neighbors and from the apartments across the street. I think that the clientele that are going to our places are respectable, and they're bringing business to the community. We have also then purchased a rundown bungalow on 1800 block of Vine Street. It was beat up. It was basically a crack den. We gutted it. We fixed it up. We beautified that property. And again, it brought up value to the neighbors, to the neighborhood. We got
thanks from our neighbors. We've been doing this for a year. We haven't had any complaints. I think in the end, again, it's just our goal was to bring a positive impact and more business to Paso Robles because we love the area and it's on the map. It's not us. It's on the map everywhere. And yeah, there's going to be more traffic when towns get popular and towns get noticed. And so I guess I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm running out of time, but I just wanted to kind of tell our story. We're new to this at a year into it, and I think it's from our perspective, it's working well. We haven't had any negative issues with our experiences.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Okay, back to the in-person speakers. Welcome back.
Thank you. Linda Colwell, Hilltop Drive. I'm wondering if you would review for us the position of the ADU units. They weren't mentioned in anything, and I thought that they were not to be allowed to be short-term rentals, except I assume the early ones were grandfathered. That's confusing to me. I don't know.
Okay. So ADUs refers to accessory dwelling units, and those are now state mandated second and third units on single family properties. And the state's been changing the laws on these fairly regularly over the last couple years. So we used to permit these as what were called second units, and second units didn't have any restrictions on them in terms of short-term rentals. A couple years ago, the state, when they changed the ADU rules and created ADUs, one of the provisions is any units that are permitted as ADUs are not allowed to be used as short-term rentals. So what was the date that started?
January 2020.
Okay. So after that, all those that were permitted after that date are prohibited by state law from being used as short-term rentals. Those that were permitted and existed prior aren't under those rules. So there's two kind of sets of ADUs within the community, some that are allowed and some that aren't allowed. We are recording deed restrictions on all the new ones that make it clear that they aren't allowed to be used as short-term rentals.
Okay. I was just curious because I couldn't get that all kind of figured out. So the home shares, I think when we worked on this, that was more considered to be like a room in your house, that type of thing. So that's not what they are. They can be separated from the main house and still be considered a home share?
So that's one of the suggested changes, is to tighten that up, because I do think the discussion was that it would be a room rented within the residence where the permit holder was living, but there was kind of a loophole where if you had multiple units on the property, you could basically rent, say, the second unit as a separate unit and not be in there. So I think that's one of the questions about whether that should be tightened up. So I think that's going to be discussed at Commission and Council.
I just was curious. And I just would want to say that, heard a lot of owners again, and without even soliciting it, because it just came up in odd conversations with literally people on the street, there is a lot of complaints that are never registered, and that's just never taken into consideration. I heard from two different people, like I said, unsolicited, that how miserable their life was because of vacation rentals. So I think to kind of hide behind that data all the time is really not accurate as far as displaying the whole picture. And then again, people have spoke the pride of how much money they're making off of the houses and how much better they would do if they could transfer permits, which please don't do that. Some of us wait and hope and dream that maybe the rentals near us will be sold and that we will be free of them, because that's kind of fair. But what it does is it really means we run an excellent chance of continuing with the situation in the impacted neighborhoods. But at the same time, the prices are being driven up so high, it really does affect kind of the everyday person that lives in Paso Robles trying to buy a home. So I think that's kind of sad. So it's 6 of one thing and half a dozen another, but please don't overlook that idea too, that increasing profit, shall we say, off of a home is obviously good for some people, but it certainly lessens that opportunity for other people. And I think that's really important, that we really need to think about our people that live here and would like to stay here. And we've got a lot of people leaving because of housing restrictions. We all know that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, who else wants to make some comments? Sir, come on up. Okay. If we could get your name, please.
Travis Marks. I have a question on your guys' complaint percentages. Have you guys done any research on the rest of the city? How many complaints you guys are getting on pools? Just to, how many, because it's 6%, right, of vacation rentals overall for Paso Robles? On the west side? 2.5 overall. So of pool complaints and noise complaints, you guys have a total of non-STRs? Just to kind of give a comparison, because we're complaining about STRs, but we want to know if we get rid of them, which I have one, and I don't have a pool, but somebody that does has a pool, and we sell it to somebody that wants to party every weekend, are we really going to get rid of the problem by getting rid of the STRs? So I was wondering if you guys had any information.
Yeah, I think that's a good one to add to the list.
Okay.
So we'll look into that.
Where we're at, because to make changes to the ordinance, we might not be solving the problem. If we sell that to somebody who has a bunch of kids and have kids over all weekend, are those neighbors of those vacation rentals going to get rid of that problem? Or are we just going to kick somebody out of business and have that same issue show up?
Okay, thank you. All right, who's next? We got a caller? Okay. Caller, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Are you ready? Yes. Hi, my name is Tim Joannis, and I live on Hilltop Drive. And I just wanted to comment to a couple of the past people that had commented, because I remember a lot of this conversation from 3 years ago, people saying, look what wonderful things we've done. We've come into the town and built our homes and our properties and brought values up and created and I don't dispute that, and I don't dispute what they've done. But, I've been in this community, my wife and I, for 42 years, and we flipped around 40 homes in this community. And we fixed them up, and we also brought values up in neighborhoods, and we took the opportunity to sell these homes to people in our community. So I want to give that other side of that picture. And then the house next door to me, one of the gals had mentioned how possibly it's devaluing her home by not being able to transfer that permit. But the home right next door to me was a vacation rental, and he sold recently, and it's 1,400 square feet and sold for $775,000 in original condition from about 1970s or maybe 60s. My point is, I don't think it devalued that property. That's quite a bit of money. The third thing I wanted to bring up is how does raising caps or transferring these permits, which is what everybody or what the conversation is going around, how does that benefit the people that live here? We talk a lot about money. We talk a lot about, look how much, taxes bring in to support roads and infrastructure and all these great things. And I don't disagree with that, but I thought we paid for that in our taxes also. And I hear people when they say, yeah, but look how much more we're bringing in, how much better we're doing than everybody else. Again, how does it benefit those that live in the community beyond the financial rewards and fixing the homes up, which I do appreciate. And as I said, I found that same benefit doing that same thing. But I also know that after being here for so long, that many, many people in this community, friends and their children, there's nowhere for them to live. And I know all of these homes wouldn't go back into the open market, but a percentage of them would. And it has driven prices up exorbitantly. And it's not just the vacation rentals, I know that. But my understanding is there may be as many 400 on the open market outside of even those that are permitted. And I go, that's a lot of homes in this community. And there's a lot of people that live here, work here, grew up here, have been raised here, and can't afford to live here anymore and can't find anywhere to live anymore. And then lastly is I just think the subject is so much bigger than just complaints or happiness or look what a great job we've done. It's for me, it's really about community. Our signs said neighborhoods are for neighbors, and I believe that. I believe neighborhoods are for neighbors, and I love my community, and I love my neighbors. And so thank you. Thank you for letting me share.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Next speaker, please. Welcome. If we get your name, please.
Thank you. My name's Dan Hurdle. I live on 15th Street. I have owned that property for 20 years. I am one of these loopholes, I guess, which is frustrating to hear because I was at every single meeting 3 years ago, both for the task force and for all the preliminary meetings and for the final vote. It was very specifically discussed as to what a home share would be and what a non-owner occupied vacation rental would be. It's ridiculous to say that I'm a loophole in that I live 25 feet from my home share. It's on the same property. It provides income to my family, and it hosts 2 people. We limit it to 2 people. It's a 1-bedroom, 594 square foot ADU that is legally allowed to be an STR, and it was discussed in that task force 3 years ago. The frustration I have is that we worked really hard to create an ordinance 3 years ago that was really good, and we've had 75 complaints, of which it was noted that most of the complaints were pool-related. Are we enforcing that? Because if we're still having frustration from people who live here in town with vacation rentals, the ordinance needs to be enforced. It doesn't need to be changed. We worked really hard to make the best possible ordinance. The second comment I have is about tax collection on Airbnbs. You put the Airbnb host within the city limits of Paso Robles at a disadvantage to the Airbnb host outside of city limits, because when a guest looks on Airbnb, they can see a price that the Airbnb is charging. Say it's $200 a night. If that $200 a night is outside city limits, the guest will have taxes added on at the time of transaction, so they will pay $220 a night. If it's inside city limits, they'll just pay the $200 a night, and the hosts then have to pay the TOT to the city. So you actually are hurting the hosts by not working with Airbnb. You're also depending on self-reporting. Whereas if you would deal directly with the companies that provide the hosting services, you would actually be able to affirm that the proper taxes are being collected. And those taxes are necessary in Paso Robles. We have plenty of problems, and this is one way that Paso Robles can gain money for the needs that they have, such as the homeless problem in the riverbed and the fires that we face each summer. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next. You're up.
Hi, Mario Guerra. I'm at 819 Marlbank. So we have a non-hosted accommodation. My parents had rentals growing up, or a rental. We had good tenants, we had bad tenants. Always hated the bad tenants. We had to go in, we had to clean the house, we had to get it ready to be able to rent it again. I have a rental out of town. Had good tenants, had bad tenants, majority good tenants. We've probably hosted several hundred people, my wife and I, over the last couple of years at our non-hosted accommodation, and overwhelmingly, the majority have been great, great tenants, great people. We have the reviews to prove it out. I hear both sides, but I do want to make one point that I don't think has been made yet. And I don't want us to lose sight of is, if I took my short-term rental today and I decided to rent it either on a 12-month lease or a month-to-month, there's no guarantee that I'm getting a good tenant. I hope for a good tenant, personally, and there's no guarantee that the neighborhood is getting a good tenant either, right? I think one of the things we can't lose sight of are some of the additional controls and safeguards that the good neighbor policy and some of the short-term rental guidelines that the city has put in place have put in place to protect residents and people that live within those neighborhoods. I think the other important part that I know one of the things that's been mentioned quite a bit is parking. If I were to rent my short-term rental today, I'm allowed 2 parking spots for that short-term rental. If I were to rent it today as either a month-to-month or a 12-month lease, I would have equal to or greater than the amount of parking being used by either a single family or people that are in a kind of a roommate situation. So I just wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And ma'am, why don't you come up, and then after you speak, we have some online callers again. So welcome, and if we could get your name, please.
Yes, hi. Janice Strockvine, and I live near a pool house, and I've lived here for over 25 years, and family and everything. So I appreciate everything that everyone has said, and I would love to have a peaceful neighborhood, and I love to have the unity of everyone being able to have what they want and to have some goals and see. We love Paso, and we would love for it to be a wonderful place for our families, for people to come visit. It's becoming popular over the whole United States. I can see that. And when that happens, things change, and we have to sort of go with the flow and think about our goals and think about what we really want and how we would like to live here. What kind of community would we want that we can still make money, that we can still have families and neighborhoods that are compatible and friendly, and just a beautiful place to live. And I'm concerned a little bit about the density of all the people here in like Vine Street and all that. There seems to be quite a few STRs there, and maybe think about that a little bit. I don't know how many would be appropriate, but if you have just, like a whole blocks where there's just, rental people, then I'm not sure how that will work. That's what I just want for our town. It's just for people to work together and to have a beautiful place where we can come and enjoy ourselves and be safe and not hear music at 2 a.m. And think of, that's the other thing, because where I live, it's near Hilltop, and the geography is very interesting. And I don't know who to call at 2 a.m. when I hear some rock and roll music. And I know that that's way over the limit. So I don't know if it's an STR, because it reflects all over. So thinking about that when we're making the zones, if we decide to make them bigger.
So you'd call the hotline first. That's the recommendation.
Say again?
Call the hotline if you have a noise concern.
At 2 a.m?
Anytime, 24 hours a day.
But what if I don't know exactly where it's coming from, because it kind of echoes all around?
Well, just call the hotline, and that's your best bet.
All right, don't call the police then. Okay.
You can call the police as well. So
Okay.
As a citizen, you have the right to call the police whenever you feel you need to. But
Okay.
we've set up the hotline to try to, simplify the process.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we have some online callers we're going to go to.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, caller. You have 3 minutes.
Oh, hi. My name is Amanda Hatt, and I am a homeowner in Paso Robles. My husband and I have been visiting Paso Robles for the last decade very frequently. It's our favorite place to spend time, and if we could live there full time, we would. But we can't, and so last year we actually bought a second home there where we spend as much of the year as we can there. And so today I just wanted to address the local community with 3 thoughts and 1 question. So the first thought or point that I wanted to make is that Paso is such an amazing community to visit. And I know you guys know that because a lot of you live there full time, and everyone on this call has some sort of interest in the community. But the city of Paso has done such an incredible job investing in downtown. And I've noticed that the wineries have really invested in their properties and facilities as well. And so I know that the local businesses and the city of Paso is very invested in the local business and winery success. People want to come to Paso. They want to experience all it has to offer. And the local restaurants and businesses and wineries really rely on that income to feed their families and their employees' families. And I'm really curious if we've asked the local businesses or wineries, or if we could ask them to share what percentage of their revenue comes from zip codes attached to credit cards that, that are outside of Paso. And could they survive without visitors to the local community? Because my guess is a lot of them, and Boutique, the Paso General Store, La Cosecha, they all rely on out-of-town tourists. So I just want to say that you guys have done a great job, and our local businesses are kind of looking to us to make sure that people can still come and continue to enjoy the wonderful community of Paso. The second point I wanted to make is that downtown is a significant piece of how people enjoy Paso, but there are so few hotels, and the ones that are there are not affordable. And so if you push people out to the hotels that are along the highway or more remote places, or even R1 in a lot of cases, then you're just transferring money, not with R1, but with hotels. You're just transferring money to big, huge corporations instead of small, independent vacation homeowners like myself, maybe eventually, or the people on this call who are invested in the community. And maybe they don't live there full time or own multiple properties, but they care about Paso. And surely giving them the revenue and letting them pay taxes on it seems better to me than giving it to the Marriott or some huge hotel corporation that doesn't care about Paso and that isn't passionate about the local community. Additionally, when people do stay in those places, they drive in and they congest the parking further when they do want to visit downtown, and they drink and drive because they can't walk from their Airbnb, which I think is another huge consideration. The last point I wanted to make is about, oh my gosh, I'm up on my 2 minutes. Okay, the last point I wanted to make is about the complaints. If there really is only 84 complaints and you have a complaint, please call in and make it. Use the channels that are available to you so that we can have good data. And then I had one question, which is with T3, are you proposing that you would take away the transfer of ownership before August? I'm just curious, since that's where our home is.
Okay, thank you, caller. So nothing will change until the ordinance is adopted. That likely will happen before August, but that'll be part of the commission council discussion. So I'd encourage anybody to make sure they're signed up on the website for notification so you know when the planning commission and city council meetings are. All right, next caller. Caller, you're on. Can you hear us?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Warren. My name is Kirk Mcconnell. I am a short-term rental owner. I own property in the T1 zone. We're a mom and pop, if you will, kind of by the shoestrings owners. And I think the ordinance, we were involved in the early stages 2 years ago and went to a lot of the meetings and all of the crafting and the design. And I think you guys, I think everybody did a good job. I think the program seems to be working well in my experience. I want to reiterate a couple of things on the T1 zone permits. I purchased in a commercial zone because I'm operating a business. And to operate a business, I really feel that the permits need to be transferable in the T1 zones specifically. if I own a restaurant, if I own a bar, if I own a salon, if I own a tattoo shop, now that those are available in Paso, I can sell those businesses as the business that they are. So I just wanted to remind everybody that the R1 is a whole different animal, and I understand that. And I'm not trying to get into the R1 off into the weeds on that, because that it's just a totally different animal. So I purchased in the commercial zone to be and run a short-term rental business. And if I'm really not allowed to transfer my permit to a buyer, if I decide to sell, I don't really feel that's a level playing field. So I think that's probably all I want to say. I really do. I hope you guys can craft some amendments and not overburden the current ordinance with too many rules. I think I agree with some of the earlier callers. And I also think that people that are running these Airbnbs are running businesses, and a little clarity in regards to a 3-year or a 5-year permit would be really good, because all businesses need to be able to at least sort of read the tea leaves for the future. If you can't, it's really hard to predict. Once again, I'll say I think city staff's done a great job, and I will leave it at that.
All right, thank you very much. Do you have another caller?
Thanks, Warren.
Caller, can you hear us? You're on.
Yeah, this is Carolyn Dismute. Can you hear me?
Yes, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, great. I live on my property and I rent a room in my house. It has a separate entrance, but there are shared walls and we are all under one roof. So I care about when and who I rent that space to. But when I went to apply for a permit, I was talked into getting a non-hosted permit because the rules were so restricted. They prevented me from going to a doctor's appointment in Templeton or dinner. And my job requires me not to be housebound for an entire booking. So I would urge you to please revisit those rules. And if you need help with understanding how the home shares actually work, I'd be happy to get on a call with someone else. I think it was unclear even from the beginning because there are a lot of different types of home shares, and I didn't want to skew the stats for non-hosted permits as well as home shares, but like I said, my job requires me not to be housebound for an entire booking. It was easy when it was weekenders, but in the pandemic, I was renting to traveling nurses who stay longer. So I had to switch that business. I have another few questions. Can the downtown area have a separate max? Since that area is already dense, we could maximize city profit in TOT tax to fix our roads or help the homeless if we allow for more permits, tourism, and rental revenue just in that zone. I understand a lot of the problems and a lot of the speakers have just been concerned about R1 zones. But if we could make downtown a separate conversation or a separate portion of the ordinance, I'd be in favor of that. And then lastly, I just wanted to second Beth's comments to lower the permits for renewals, since all the work has already been done, the paperwork or whatever goes into them. I think they were a little steep to begin with. And I understand why the home share was a different price than the non-hosted, but maybe renewal fees could have a different cost attached to them. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. I think we have one more caller coming up. Caller, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
All right, welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Liz Lee. Thank you, Warren. This is Liz Lee. I am an STR owner in the R1 zone. So I guess I'm speaking on behalf of the R1, or just everyone in general. But thank you for doing a great job. I can't believe it's already been 3 years. And it's, I think we have a really good balance of what's going on with the ordinance in place. It's going great. The complaints are pretty much almost nothing over the last 2 years. And I got to say that please don't punish the STR owners when we don't know if that is actually the problem. I can factually say that there's a new owner next door to me in the R1 zone. They're from the Bay Area. Nice people. It's not an STR. But when they come into town, they throw raging parties. I mean, 2 in the morning, crazy loud, and they're having fun, and I'm happy for them. But like I said, why get rid of something that when we don't know if we're the problem? So, like, let's see how it goes in the next few years. The hotline's great. We provide a service where we're not gouging out-of-towners. We're providing a great service to them, providing reasonable rates. It's people helping people, and that's community, and that's my definition of community, and that's it. Thank you so much. Don't fix what's not broken.
All right, thanks, Liz. Okay, anybody else in the room want to make any comments before we start to wrap up? Going. All right. Thank you. Okay, so this is really what we wanted to accomplish tonight. We wanted to get everybody's input. We know this is a complicated issue. We know it really affects people, whether you're a resident or an operator. So we want to make sure we got everybody's comments. Next step in this process will be likely the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission will be holding a hearing. So you can sign up, as I said, on the website for notifications on all Planning Commission and City Council agendas. So I'd encourage you to do that. They'll be reviewing an actual draft ordinance. I'm not exactly sure what that's going to be, but everything that we heard tonight will be considered as we go through the process of preparing that draft. What the Planning Commission's role is they make a recommendation. So they'll hold a hearing, they'll take all the public comment, they'll make potentially changes or fine-tune the ordinance, and then that will then get referred on to the City Council. City Council has the final say. Likely the City Council meeting is probably going to be May or June, I would expect, and then that meeting will be where potentially a final decision on this will be. And then, as we said, the resolution is intended to come back after the ordinance process is completed. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for their participation. I think it's been a good meeting tonight, and we'll let you know when the next meetings are. Thank you.